Hi everyone, I'm Michael Jeffries, and I'd like to interview the man behind the scenes, Chris Hebard. And Chris, you do such a great job of interviewing a lot of the non-duality guests that you have and the teachers, but we want to know about you today.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So first of all, where did you grow up?
Well, I was raised in Connecticut and Pennsylvania. So I'm an East Coast boy. And I moved to the West Coast, I guess in the 70s. And I've been here on and off since then.
Okay. And what kind of kid were you?
I think if I was going to say something overreaching about that, because it's a very difficult thing to sort of categorize, but I would say that I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I had a fairly uneventful early childhood. I went away to prep school when I was fairly young. And I felt like someone forgot to hand me the playbook. And so I felt very uncomfortable in my own skin. I lived away from home more than at home from the time I was 12 on. So from that point of view, I was fairly independent fairly early on.
Did you have any kind of religion in your upbringing?
My parents were both atheist, but we were raised Unitarian Universalist. And although I didn't think that any of that was very influential, my mom was, in retrospect, she was into Krishnamurti, she was into Gurdjieff, and she was sort of into a Gnostic Christian thing. She would talk to us about the teachings of Christ, but not the Bible per se. So.
Any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, older brother and a younger brother. Older brother's an attorney, younger brother's a photographer.
Yeah, and what were you into? Were you into sports? Were you into,
Yeah, I was into being a kid and a rebellious one at that. And so, although I was, I had interest in tennis and skiing and stuff like that, as I became a teenager, my identity came wrapped up in being sort of anti-authority.
Anti-authority?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was during the 60s, during the Vietnam War and all that. So.
Were you out there protesting or getting actually involved?
Yeah, secondarily after getting high. So that was the other big thing to do back then, right? So yeah, I was pretty. It's pretty hard to share with someone who wasn't really an adult during that period of time how frightening it was to live in the United States when we were at war with Vietnam, and everybody was getting drafted, and a lot of your friends were coming back in boxes, and so that created a pretty dramatic environment.
Did you have any heroes or role models back then that you looked up to?
Yeah, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Alan Watts. I used to drink with Alan Watts. So sort of this weird, very radical left-wing politics coupled with a lot of interest in stuff that the Beat poets, the Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Gary Snyder group sort of brought to America, D.T. Suzuki, some of the Zen stuff and that kind of, but it never really sort of became a primary focus for me. I was probably first a hedonist.
What was your major in college and where did you go?
I went to a lot of places. I graduated from the University of the Pacific, or Pathetic, depending on your point of view, in Stockton, California. My undergraduate degree was in liberal arts, although I have enough credits to get a math degree as well. I went on after my undergraduate degree and did some studying in electrical engineering. I did not complete that degree.
What was your passion back then?
Partying.
Partying?
Women and partying, yeah.
Women
sure.
and partying.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's having fun. I was a social director for the university. I did all their concert stuff. In fact, when I left school, I went into the music business in the Bay Area. So I really always thought that my career would be about throwing parties for people.
Seriously?
Yeah, I really thought that's what I did best.
You fancy yourself a Hugh Hefner?
Not a Hugh Hefner, but when I was at the University of the Pacific, I did the concert series there. And I got involved in agency and management and record production and concert promotion in Northern California. And I sort of thought that was a great way to make a living, or not to make a living, but to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. So was that what you were about, was having a good time?
As a hedonist, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So was there any, a lot of us grew up with feeling insecure, or that wasn't an issue for you? You had a lot of confidence?
Externally, I had an appearance of having great self-confidence, being a leader, but I think underneath it all, there was a great deal of discomfort in my own skin, as I said before. So yeah, I mean, it's very easy to have a lot of confidence when you drink a fifth of Jack Daniels every day. When you've got an ounce of cocaine or whatever else it is that you need. So I had a little drinking and drug problem that sort of caught up with me as the years went on.
And what was the turning point for you when you realized, this just isn't going to work?
Well, my life has been a series of those. There's no particular one of them. One of the first ones for me was when I got confronted and put into rehab in 1980. And I'm very lucky, I guess, that I got that message, because a lot of my friends didn't, and we ended up burying a lot of them. So there was that, and then there was a long period of time where I really worshipped business success and money. I think that's an image that's given to us a lot when we were kids. And I did that for a while until finally that whole thing turned on me and ate me alive. And when everything that I thought to be true sort of collapsed, that was sort of the final straw. And that happened in 2006.
Okay. And was that which I've heard you talk about before, your dark night of the soul?
Yeah, you get this impression like this was a short-term thing if you've read or heard me talk about it before, like it was an instantaneous experience. But for me, there was a period of time of almost 20 years where nothing that I did went wrong. Everything that I did went my way. And I made a lot of money, and I was very successful, and I was very assertive and extroverted, cynical, sarcastic, entrepreneurial. And then I went through a period of time, an extended period of time, where everything went against me. I mean, everything went against me. And in that space, it became very clear that objects, I was trying to complete myself of objects. And I guess I always felt as though happiness for me was about just getting one more thing. It's about more. And that finally led to the point where I just had a complete and total collapse, where things had gone so unbelievably bad for so long that I finally just collapsed. And that culminated in an event that some people have heard about, in which I just sort of ended up in a fetal position on the floor of a study in my house, uncontrollably sobbing, praying what I feel is the only honest prayer there is: please help me. And I'm not sure if it was a cathartic release because of the crying and shaking that I was going through, or what it was, but in that moment, I fell into an infinity, into a void, into an emptiness without boundaries.
Was it almost like a near-death experience? Did you see the white tunnel and the light?
No, it was non-objective. It's very hard to explain with words. It was a spaceless space.
A void.
Yeah, it was a void, but it wasn't a nothing void. It was, it's very hard to explain. But in that space, standing as that space, there was still a Chris sitting there, and there were thoughts arising. And they would come up, they would be there, and then they'd go away. And then there'd just be the silence. And then another thought would come up. It'd be there for a little while, and then it'd go away. And as this was going on, it just occurred to me, it's very suddenly, it was a very simple realization. It doesn't sound like much, but if I could see these thoughts arising being there and going away, then who am I? What am I? If I'm sitting here watching this process going on.
When you say watching, you mean visually you could literally see the thoughts rise or feel them?
No, just witnessing them. This wasn't a visual hallucination. Again, there was nothing objective about the space that I was standing in, but it was realer than anything that I've ever experienced. I guess I would call it the ground of being. But coming out of that, you know, I hear these stories of these great epiphanies or glimpses and that kind of stuff, which are so wonderful and Satori-like and blissful. This wasn't that for me. This was profoundly disruptive, because I was a very self-confident entrepreneur. I was very aggressive, very extroverted, and that's all based upon the assumption that you know who you are. And coming out of this, I had no idea who I was. I had no clue who I was, and so there was no way that I could even move. I couldn't do anything anymore. I couldn't do business. I just had no idea what to do, because I had no clue as to who I was anymore.
How long did this period last?
It went on for, there was a period of at least a year when I stopped working, when I left, and really went into solitude. I did a lot of journaling, I did a lot of meditating. I knew nothing about this. Nothing about non-duality, Advaita, never heard of a teacher. My only reaction, the only thing that I knew about was someone who tried to give me a copy of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now.
Sure.
And I was so sarcastic and cynical, I picked it up and I said, "What's this piece of crap?" And I threw it across the room.
Wow.
I wouldn't even, I mean, it wasn't even like, you know, I figured it was somewhere's right in the same space that doing 900 psychic commercials on television was. Okay, just as ratty as power crystals and Sedona. I wasn't open at all. And if nothing else, that experience left me with nothing but openness. There was nothing but openness. I had no answers. I had no answers for anything. I had no idea. And it was just because of that, that during that period where I was really sitting with myself and doing that, I spent a lot of time on the internet. As you and I were talking about, the internet's a very powerful thing, connecting people and doing all that. And it wasn't like there was a resource out there at that time, a cogent resource. Maybe the closest thing to a cogent resource would have been Dennis Waite's advaita.org.uk, which is a London site. Traditional Vedanta, but certainly nothing that I could connect with right away. But it was through there, a little bit here and a little bit there, that I would hear something. And when I found those things, I like held on to them, you know, and I started depositing them on this little website that I had, just sort of collecting stuff. And during that period after this sort of catastrophic event, there was a night when I couldn't sleep. And I was walking around the house and I stumbled back onto this book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I had no idea who he was, none, okay? And I figured, well, I can't sleep, so I'm just gonna sit here and speed read this thing. This book just kept showing up over and over again. I tried to throw it away, here it would be in the house again. I don't know who gave it to me, I don't know how it got there, I don't know. But that night I just finally, I was angry at the book. I just said to myself, okay, I'm just going to speed read this thing. I've taken all the Evelyn Wood speed readings.
Power of Now. Yeah.
So I sat down and I started reading. I figured it would take me 45 minutes, I'll be through it. And I was into it about 15 or 20 pages and I went, oh, I'm not going to read this in an hour and a half. This might take me a week and a half. And then I read a little bit more of it and then I realized, oh, I might not get this in a week and a half. This might take me a month and a half or a year and a half. And as I was going through it, I was fascinated by what I was reading. Some people get this book, some people don't. I mean, I can't speak to why that is. But I got to the part of the story where he talks about being at Oxford and having this dark night of the soul experience himself, where in a moment of absolute desperation, he saw his thoughts arising to himself, and that was really the turning point for him. And I saw that, and I almost split my gut. I almost blew up. I almost exploded because that was the first thing I had ever seen from anybody who had anything that spoke to what I'd experienced. And I was so excited because up until that point, I sort of figured like, there's just as good a chance that I'm going to end up in a mental hospital as anything else. I mean, this was not like some great opening enlightenment experience. This was like, I don't know, maybe I need to be hospitalized.
Well, it's just so interesting too, because it sounds like at that time, it would have given you some comfort to know that someone else had gone through it, and here the universe brought it to you, and your first reaction, as is so often the case, was to chuck it across the room and say, I don't want to look at this.
Yeah, it's so true. Some people seem to get this naturally. I've met so many people that are on this path. And I meet people that are like teenagers, and they're just like so peaceful, and they get this thing, and they're such remarkable human beings. And it just couldn't have been different for me. I mean, the only way I've ever gotten anything is to be hit over the head with a 2x4.
Yeah, it seems that there's some resistance always.
Yeah.
And then finally, you're like, okay. And when there it was.
Yeah. So I reached out to Eckhart, and I reached out to the people that he knew, and some people that knew him recommended some other writers and teachers and that kind of stuff. And it was sort of a cavalcade. As I would find that stuff, I would keep bringing it all in. And I started thinking, well, maybe I'll put together this little website, and then there'll be like channel markers in the ocean. Is what I thought, bringing someone to shore. I said, at least there'll be some kind of record here, so that if someone else is going through something as frightening as what I went through, at least they'll be able to find a safe place, and they'll be able to find stuff that's not phony stuff. It's not about pet psychics or about power crystals or something like that, but it'll be stuff that's sincere and honest in its pursuit of this stuff, and leave it there. And that's how Stillness Speaks came to pass. By the way, the name Stillness Speaks was borrowed from Eckhart Tolle.
So that was the original name. You started with that name, and you stuck with it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. When did it start to click for you? When did you really begin to go, oh, okay, there's something here that needs investigation, and this feels right?
To me, the first second that this happened, there was a need for investigation, because as I said, I had no idea who I was anymore. I can't even begin to explain to you how profound this was. It was the inability to be able to assert myself in any direction, in business, in personal life, or anything. So it became an all-consuming interest. It became an interest based out of survival initially. And then I'm one of those people that experiences happen to first, and then after the experience, the knowledge is accumulated to begin to understand the nature of what's going on in these experiences. And so I had a number of those experiences over time. Shortly after meeting some of Eckhart Tolle's people, I was given an unpublished copy of a book called Eternity Now by Francis Lucille. It wasn't even published. And at the very end of it, it had his phone number on it. And I read this book and I said, oh my God, who wrote this thing? This is like the most unbelievable thing I've ever read. And I kept looking at the phone number going, no, this was given to me by someone that's probably just, not supposed to be, I kept like, I got a call. And so I called, and I got a guy who lives half the year with Francis, Raj, the sweetest guy you'll ever know. I called Francis Lucille, and I got his assistant, who told me to come down, and they said they'd get together, you could ask questions and do that kind of stuff. And then he said afterwards, we usually have dinner, and then maybe we watch a movie together. And I was like going, maybe we watch a movie together. So even in my twisted mind, there was this hierarchy, the teachers up here and the students down here, and there's something to be learned from something out there that make me feel whole and complete. So there was all that stuff going on. But I was so intrigued that I flew down here. And I spent some time down here, and I had a series of remarkable experiences, and all of those, my entire path in life was completely reset.
Where were you living at that time? You say you
I was
flew
living
down
in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I was living in Dallas, Texas. So I'd gone out a couple of times. I'd gone up to Vancouver.
To see Eckhart.
Yeah, and there was Gangaji was up there, and Pamela Wilson was hanging around up there, and Adyan Shanti was hanging around. So I got to see some of those folks, and then I went down and I met Francis Lucille. So I hit some pretty good people pretty early on. I had people within the community saying, you might be interested in so-and-so. And so when I hit that vein, it was very productive. And I just kept taking their stuff and putting it away, the stuff that was ringing true to me.
That was my next question. I was going to say, what was it about the non-duality Advaita material because in a way it's almost a blessing that I have this image of like a plate, and you had all this ego and all the things you thought you were, and then it all got wiped out and you didn't know what you were, who you were. And in a way, the plate was now clean. So you could begin to pick and choose only rather than all the beliefs and labels that we take on.
It's a tremendous amount of conditioning here, though. I don't want to give the impression that there was any single event that cleaned the plate. But metaphorically, I can say it this way, that once you've been kissed by God, there's no turning back. And having experienced this spaceless space, there was never any turning back. There was never any doubt in my mind what I was going to do. I met Francis. I came down here. I knew that something very special was going on here. I was on a plane back to Texas. I was saying to myself on the plane, what am I going to do now? And it just occurred to me, the thought just occurred to me, what I'm going to do is sell everything that I have in Dallas and move to Temecula.
Wow.
And that's what I did.
Talk about commitment.
Well, it really wasn't even about making a decision. It was just obviously the next step, you know.
Well, Ramesh Balsekar has a saying where he talks about the head in the tiger's mouth. That once your head is in the mouth, you're done. I mean, you don't know you're done, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen.
I absolutely find that to be true. And for a lot of the people that I meet, that, you know, there's no turning back. You may think you're making choices about this, but you're really not making choices about this at all. If you need to know this, you need to know it.
Yeah, I know for me, you know, I had written a book, Success Secrets of the Motivational Superstars, about Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer and Brian Tracy and all these great motivational speakers, but something was missing. And I didn't know what it was, and funny enough, we both have that in common. I was walking through a Barnes & Noble, and there was a copy of a book called The Power of Now.
Right.
And I picked it up and read less than a paragraph, closed it and went up and bought it and took it home, and couldn't believe what I was reading, that life is now.
Right.
Here I had interviewed all these top men and women, millionaires, superstar motivational speakers. No one had ever talked about life being in the present moment. And I was like, how could I have missed this? It seems so obvious now, but at the time, somehow you're always planning for the future, setting goals. It's always never about now. What's going on here? There's nothing here. It's all about what I'm going to get.
The lineal progression of time.
Yeah, so was that for you? I'm just curious, because for me, it was like somebody taking my head, and instead of my eyes pointing forward, it was like here.
Yeah. The only thing I can share with you about that is that, yeah, absolutely, but I didn't even understand what you've just enunciated. I was dropped into nothingness. That's all I can tell you. And in nothingness, there is no time and there is no space. It's just it. So then you sort of go, what the hell just happened to me? You know, what's going on? And then over a period of being with people, you investigate this stuff, you start realizing, okay, what is time? I never experience anything but right now. If I have a past, it's because a memory's arising right now, and I've never experienced the future. One of the questions you said you wanted to ask me is, what do you think about the future, mankind? I said, I've never experienced the future. I've never experienced it. The best that I can do is be the best Chris that I can be right now.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. So I'm not a big believer in time anymore, but I don't think that started as a concept with me. You know, it was nice, it was beautiful, this stuff would reverberate and then it would leave you. It's like when you read a great piece of non-dual literature and you hit something that really resonates with you, and there's this space. It drops you into the space and you put the book down. Okay? Because the book is, the message isn't in the words. The message isn't in the words, it's between the words.
Yeah, the book is the menu.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about, the presence, and that's what I've seen Eckhart Tolle 4 or 5 times in person, and his stillness fills the room. I shared with you at dinner with you and your wife that I was afraid to reach in the bag to pull out my camera to quietly take a picture for fear of making any rustling noises because I didn't want to disturb the energy that somehow Eckhart's presence permeated the room.
He's very sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
His dog's not bad either.
His dog.
Maya.
Maya.
Very cute.
Yeah, so when did StillnessSpeaks.com really begin to flourish and you realize, okay, I'm going to be putting my energy into this thing?
Stillness Speaks became a labor pretty early on because the technical competence required to do a website that would do what I wanted it to do was far beyond my abilities. I didn't have any skills in this. And so I had a guy who was helping me. We were both sort of stumbling along. He was sort of an art director more than he was an internet guy. Knew a little bit about film, a little bit about the internet, a little bit about advertising. Enough for both of us to get into a lot of trouble. And so it's just been, ever since that time, sort of meeting on this path. It's always been driven by the love of being in the company of like-minded people. And some of those people have talents. And when I find those people and it's a joy, they come in and we work on it. So it was just a huge mess. It was like this huge knotted yarn ball.
What year are we talking about here?
I would say 2007, we started to reskin it. And by 2008, it actually started looking like it looks now.
Okay.
Okay, so between 2006 and 2008 was a lot of redesign going on, not only just graphic, but the what's going on behind the scenes on Stillness Speaks is pretty intense as well.
Who were some of your first teachers that you showcased on it?
Well, I really wasn't about showcasing any particular teacher. It was always about what was resonating with me. And because I was with Francis a lot, the first filming that I did was really with him. And during that period of time, even before I hooked up with Francis, I talked to Dennis Waite in London saying that I wanted to go to India, but I didn't want to go by myself. I wanted to go with someone who knew what was going on in India. And he said, oh, I got a guy you need to meet. And I said, who's that? And he said, this guy, James Schwartz, who is just the funniest guy you'll ever meet in your entire life. And he and I met, and we did go to India, and we spent some time together. And so what I know of traditional Vedanta, a lot of that I learned through James, who was the personal assistant of one of the great teachers in 20th century India, Chinmaya. And so both those guys were very influential starting. And then everything that's happened from there has just been because someone appeared in that moment that I found interesting. It's never been like, oh, I want to go get this person, or I want to get that person. It's just, oh my goodness, who's this?
Yeah.
And who's this? And boy, have they written something that's amazing, or boy, do they have an unbelievable sense of presence. Or they did something that was so magical for me that I wanted to make it available for other people. And that's not saying that what's magical for me should be what's magical for you. The only criteria here is that I know that there's sincerity and there's depth of interest, that there's love of the truth. Okay, if that's a sincere interest and I don't detect any bad behavior, chances are you'll find your way onto Stillness Speaks, you know, because I can't say what you need to hear or what you need to see. I can only speak with authority on what I need to see.
Let's talk for a second about love of truth. That's beautiful. Love of truth. I find, and you and I were discussing it earlier, a lot of people dabble. A lot of people, I remember one time at a Eckhart Tolle meetup that I was leading, there was a young girl who was a college student. She raised her hand and she said, Michael, between going to school and my homework and my job and my boyfriend, when am I supposed to find time for all this spiritual stuff? And I'm like, well, that's not really kind of how it is. It's really, that comes first and everything, yeah. So I find that the people that are really sincerely like, you almost have to have it all wiped away. You have to get to that point where nothing matters except the truth to you. That's when I find things begin to really, and it can get worse before it gets better. Yeah.
There's a great guy, an American mystic by the name of Robert Adams, passed away. And he studied with Ramana Maharshi, but he was an American outlaw and a great spiritual teacher. And he shared that all is well and is unfolding exactly as it should. And so I don't believe that the person who has got a really busy lifestyle running around with their career or their family or whatever it is doing anything different than I'm doing. They're just still coming to the conclusion for themselves that happiness isn't in the object. And they're going to go through whatever they're going to go through until they finally realize that what they're looking for can't be found out there. So everybody's doing that. And as that process goes on, you find more and more people that have this, it's grace. And when you first come around, it's like grace bites you and all of a sudden you have an interest in the truth, and then more and more grace starts showing up because of your interest in the truth, and then eventually all there is grace. And when I look back now at all the things that I've been through, I say to myself, there's no part of it that wasn't absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Whether or not I was fighting for my next job or completely full of myself and egoic, self-assertive, entrepreneurial, aggressive, self-confident piece of crap that I really was, I really was too. So it was all necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this this trust in life, just like how we met, and it seems like your decision making all of a sudden stops being a mental thing, and there's this opening of the heart and this intuitive type guidance where one thing just seems to flow to the other, and it's almost magical the way it happens once you get the scent of it. And I see, I see the more I let go and the more I trust,
I think we've become more aware of how synchronous everything is. I think it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just we weren't available to see it. So.
Well, I think Wayne Lickerman, where he talks about the cars at Disneyland, where you think you're driving on this, as a little kid, you're controlling the car, but it's on a track. You're never controlling it, even when you think you are.
Yeah. It's a great image, isn't it? Because you're having so much fun driving the car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you should hear him tell the story. Because, if there's a rock there and you see the rock and you turn to the right and the track happens to go to the right, you think you did that. You're like, boy, I'm a good driver. But the next time, you want to go left and you turn left and the car goes right again. Wait a second, what's going on here?
Fate. Must be fate. Couldn't be me.
So you've had a chance to interview a lot of great teachers, and in your experience, Chris, what makes a good spiritual teacher?
That's a good question, because I think the criteria to be a good teacher is different than being awakened. Just because you're awake doesn't make you a good teacher. There are qualifications to being a good teacher, and to be able to stand in someone else's shoes and walk with them in a way that they can see for themselves the truth of what's going on, because it's no value for me to tell you this is the way it is.
Yeah.
Right? You just inherit another belief that doesn't work. The trick is to be able to hear what someone is saying and be able to stand and understand the place that they're standing, and then come stand next to them and say, let's take a walk together and see how true that is, and let them do it. And I think that's a very rare skill, very rare skill. So.
Who are some of the modern teachers that you really respect and think do that well?
Well, this is going to be what works well for Chris Hebard. I'm not going to sit here and say that what works well for me should work well for someone else. But I can tell you that Francis Lucille has been, and always will be my teacher. He's a remarkable person, and if you want to go deep sea fishing, I suggest that he might be a good resource for you. Okay. I also happen to think that Rupert, who was a student of Francis Lucille's, Rupert Spira, is an exceptional teacher, and brings a coloring to this teaching, which is from a different place, different stance. He comes to this as an artist, and so his message is very beautiful. For me, Greg Good was an extraordinary help, because my teacher really teaches a lot around perception, the sensations, bodily sensations, the sensory perceptions, the thoughts and the feelings that represent 100% of the input we have, and being able to see and sort through that stuff. And that all came from the work of a guy, a great Indian. Most of the better work that I've seen, by the name of Sri Atmananda Menon. Greg is very good, very skillful in dissecting, isolating each of the senses: the sense of taste, the sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the tactile sense, thoughts, feelings, et cetera, and so forth, and isolating each one of those and letting you explore what is the information that's actually there, and what is it that it's upadi, is a superimposition of the mind on top of that. And that's a very powerful deconstruction, because it's not all about a mental understanding here. There's an ignorance of the mind, yes, but there's an ignorance of the body as well, and how we perceive what's going on. Yeah. And there's a tremendous amount of overlay going on.
Oh.
So I think Greg's very good at that deconstruction.
Yeah. As you know, I reviewed your interview with him, Illumination, and I must have watched that thing, God, those 2 DVDs every day for a week and a half. Yeah. It took a long time to go through. And then I would go for a run, and I would practice looking at color and say, yes, color does shape and color and shape. Yeah. And I began not labeling anything. And it's kind of funny, but I actually, when I talk about this, I talk about it is kind of like a skill. You get better at it the more you do it. You want to be present, practice being present. You want to be still, be still. And I found that the more I would watch you guys on the DVD and then go try it, go see if I could see what Greg was talking about. And often I couldn't. I mean, I'd have to go back and rewind it. But through just, like, I think Greg says something really important. He says, if you skip over something you don't clearly understand, it will come back to bite you in the butt. So if there was something I didn't understand, I'd replay it over and over and over, or even Google it and search and read more about it till I really, really thought I had a grasp of what he was talking about. So that's the kind of, and when you're reviewing this stuff, you do it. That's one of the things I like. Someone asked me, why do you do these reviews? And I said, well, part of it is it forces me to really dig into the material much deeper than if you're just casually reading.
Amen.
Yeah.
It's like editing a film.
Yes.
There's no way that any expression that someone has said to you isn't learned and really absorbed and become part of you if you're so intimately involved with it that you actually edit it. And so that, and doing the same thing from writing and all of that. Just to be totally present to the material all the way down to that level. But it also says something else very interesting about you, which is that you've been bitten.
Yes.
Yeah. This is not a passing Advaita cocktail chatter for you. To want to spend that kind of time, to not really understand how you could want to spend time on something else. That's it. And there are not a lot of people out there, I think, who are really bitten by this that way. And that's what StillnessSpeaks is about. It's for people that have been bitten. It's not really a great resource if you're just looking for some social interaction or a feel-good experience. So yeah, that's very clear talking to you that that your heart is in this. It's also very clear in the material that you write, which is one of the reasons I invited you to come in and write for StillnessSpeaks, is that there's such a sincerity and such a thoroughness in how you look at this material that it just says, okay, you got to give this guy a forum. I mean, this guy is completely obsessed. He's the same as you. You're the same as me.
Well, it's funny because, like, trying all the other paths, trying the success route, the motivational route, positive thinking, all that stuff, listening to affirmations when I would go to sleep at night, I tried reprogramming. And when I discovered non-duality, I was like, well, of course it's not working, because I'm still starting with a person that I believe is there. And once you get the scent of this and you realize, wait a second, that's just an assumption that kind of no one ever told me that, you know, I should go investigate. And when you look at people like Greg and Rupert and all the great teachers, Francis and Eckhart, and they're coming from such peace. And you want that. Oh God, their stillness, you would give everything you own for that. You're like, I want that. And then it begins to dawn on you, wait a second, they're no different than I am. That was a big one for me, was realizing you kind of, in the beginning, you kind of, like in society, you know, you put people on a pedestal, but then you, as you study this, you begin, no, it's the same in them that's in me. And then you say, well, then what's different? Well, they've just investigated it more completely until the questions have begun to drop away. And so you get excited and you get a passion. And I guess, yeah, getting bit is the right way to say it, because you know, it's like, I don't know, I was going to ask you this. The idea of now, like, if you ask me, do I want to go out to a movie? I rarely see movies anymore. I'd much rather stay home and watch a video or read a book or grow or even write. That pleases me. That makes me happy and gives me a sense of, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, there's a calling to this. It's a great joy for me. There is no way that this can really be effectively communicated with words. Okay. But having said that, it's the most fun thing in the world to try.
It's a noble task.
And as I've gone on doing it, I think my heart really has taken me more away from linear thinking and more into poetry and prose and art and humor and different ways of being able to communicate that non-verbally. I'm sort of more interested in that. But just great love, and it's almost the act of honoring the stillness. It's the act of honoring the stillness.
Well said, well said. You know, I remember saying to my sister for about a year, a couple of years ago, I was saying, you know, something's off. This is when I was still searching. And I said, I can't put my finger on it, but something's off about the way most of us are living our lives. It just feels off. Like it can't be this much of a struggle. It just can't be. And I looked around and I didn't see anybody else looking particularly happy either. It wasn't like they knew something I didn't. It seemed like we were all suffering way too much. I'm like, that just doesn't feel right to me. It's almost like, you know, you're at a chessboard, but you're playing checkers. You're playing the wrong game. You don't understand the rules. You're just doing everything wrong, but occasionally you'll get something right and feel good about it. And, you know, and the happiest I'd see people get was when their football team scored a touchdown. And I go, but that doesn't affect your life. That guy gets the money, he gets the glory. Why are you feeling so happy that one day every Sunday? Because he scored a touchdown. It just I didn't connect with that. So for me, it was about finding a way of living life that was actually fun and enjoyable, and I had a good time. Like, I knew that had to be available. And that's what StillnessSpeaks.com provides people, was an opportunity to take a look at maybe, just maybe, if this resonates with them, they can begin to find the love and peace that they suspect is possible. And lo and behold, look within.
The beauty of it for me is that it's always been a commercial disaster.
And financially?
And, I would expect that it would continue to be that. But, you know, when people ask you, why do I do this? The answer is so simple, and that's that the currency of Stillness Speaks is not in cash. The currency in Stillness Speaks is the remarkable people that you get to meet and that become your true friends. So the upgrade, the quality of people that are in my life is just like unbelievable. I can get off a plane in Greece and Europe and Iceland, China, and within moments I can be in touch with someone who's really deeply in love with this thing. And then the most beautiful people that you could ever want to know. They're creative, they're intelligent, they're humble. Got to be careful when you brag about anything around these people, because they generally know much more than you do. You know, so that's the commerce of Stillness Speaks, and I've been honored to be able to talk to some people that call themselves teachers, but also to meet this class of people out there that are sort of like Yannis in the mist. They have no interest in being teachers. They have no interest in fame or glory or being the leader of the non-duality movement, however bizarre, strange that would be, right? They're just remarkable people, and every once in a while, if you touch them, they'll drop you an email. And you meet and you start collecting these people that are just the most remarkable people. And in the end, after all the mystery, you know, and after all the seeking is pretty much done, really there's nothing left but celebration. And what better way to celebrate than to be in the company of like-minded people? So that's it. That's the Stillness Speaks story. Thanks.